afternoon, everyone. My name is Nancy Lopez. I'm on the board of directors of DC Refers, and I am thrilled to welcome you all to the DC Refers Reconnect on consumer law issues. Our guest today is Sarah Hollander from Tzedek DC, which is a nonprofit in DC that's focused on consumer and debt issues. And Sarah is the associate director of Tzedek DC and has a wealth of experience in consumer issues and a lot of other areas as well. She was previously a staff attorney for the Brooklyn Defender Services Civil Justice Unit and was an Equal Justice Works Fellow. She also has experience in immigration law from her time at the Legal Aid Society of DC and was a postgraduate legal fellow at the Pace Community Law Practice. She has done FEMA work and all kinds of different things. So we are thrilled that she has her finger on the pulse of consumer law issues in DC now, with her work at Tzedek, and excited to see and hear what new things are happening there. To have a little bit of interaction with the people who are here today, I want to do a three-part get to know you activity. It's called like a waterfall chat. And what it is I will give you a prompt. You will type in the chat your answer, but don't hit enter. Just type the word. And then I will give a countdown, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Everyone will hit enter at the same time. And then you'll see in the chat all of the answers scroll in. So the first one is really easy. Type into the chat, what is your favorite school? It might be where you went to law school, where you went to undergrad, where your kids go to school. But what is your favorite institution? Maybe it's the school that helped you win March Madness brackets, whatever it is. If you'll type it in now, and then we'll count down 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, and you can hit enter. And we've got places from all over the country. That's one of the great things about DC is it brings together people who have had experiences all kinds of different places. The next question is, what would be your dream remote workplace? If you could work this summer from anywhere in the world, what city or what place would you go to and work remotely with perfect internet that worked all of the time, and somehow the time zone would be the same as whatever you needed to be at any time? Where would you go? Go ahead and type it in, and then we'll go 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, and hit enter. We've got lots of people in the US in beautiful places and people all around the world. You know, the Caribbean is always a good bet. And then the last one is, if you had to practice in one very narrow specific type of case, one practice area for all of your cases for the rest of your career, what would it do? What would it be? Would you do consumer cases, landlord-tenant cases, family cases? Is there a specific kind of case that you really love and are passionate about and would want to do all the time? Go ahead and type in your answer, and then we'll go 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Yeah. And I see lots of things that I know people already are doing. So what a lucky group we are to be able to be doing some of your dream jobs. Thank you for playing along to get to know each other a little bit. And with that, I'm going to go ahead and hand it over to Sarah Hollander to tell us more about DC Refers and about the consumer law updates in the District of Columbia. Sarah.
Hi, everybody, and especially hi to those of you that I know personally and have worked with. First to start, well, as Nancy said, I'm Sarah Hollander. I'm from Tzedek DC. I also am a board member of DC Refers. DC Refers is an online directory of pre-screened attorneys who are willing to accept modest means clients who have agreed to pay legal fees at a reduced rate. And the program really bridges the gap for those individuals who are earning too much income to be eligible for free legal services, but at the same time can't afford market rates of attorneys in the district. And so it's a really fantastic service. And one thing I made a note to mention is that we also have an exciting new process, which that is that mediators have now joined DC Refers. So if you have a case that needs mediation, you can access mediators who similarly have agreed to work for reduced rates through the DC Refers panel. And I am going to attempt to screen share. So today's presentation is really about updates to DC consumer law, although federally there have been some exciting changes as well, including the No Surprises Medical Billing Act, but today we'll focus on DC. Okay, can everybody see the PowerPoint? Great. So at Tzedek DC, we have the mission to safeguard the legal rights and financial health of DC residents with low incomes, dealing with the often devastating consequences of abusive debt collection practices and other consumer-related issues, which means that this consumer work is really what we focus on, and certainly the direct representation is important, but we also worked with coalition advocates to get some of the consumer laws that we're going to talk about passed. I won't really go into it because this is a short presentation today, but everyone will get a copy of this PowerPoint. And so if you are interested in referring individuals to us, here is a bit of our income eligibility. So updates to DC consumer law. The most, well, from my perspective, the most impactful change is really a temporary and emergency change that we are under from the Protecting Consumers from Unjust Debt Collection Practices Emergency Amendment Act. This is a temporary law that came out of the end of the moratorium that was put in place at the beginning of the pandemic. I've put here for you the links to the specific places in the code that you can find these changes, because there are certainly more changes than we'll be able to talk about today. And also Tzedek DC posted a recap of the changes as well. So if you would like to view the website there, you can see just a greater description of all of the changes that there have been. So I think that some of the biggest changes that are in place under the temporary and emergency laws is that there is a prohibition on debt collectors making more than 3 phone calls to a consumer in 7 days. There is now a requirement that before filing a lawsuit, a collector has to have evidence and documentation of the original creditor. They need to have the current holder of the debt. They need to have the debtor's last account number. And most impactfully, they need to have a copy of the contract or other documents that evidence the liability and terms of the contract, as well as the date that the debt was incurred and the date and time of last payment. And if applicable, an itemized accounting. And this is really, really important, at least from our perspective, because a high number of these debt collection cases end up in default, where either because of sewer service, the person doesn't know to come to court, or because they're not able to come to court, or they think they have no protections, people don't come to court. And so there are many, many default judgments in this space. This requirement before filing will mean, or hopefully will mean, that there are fewer default judgments against individuals who the debt buyers and debt collectors never actually had the evidence to show that they were truly the ones responsible for the debt. Also importantly, it allows a consumer to request actual damages, costs, attorney's fees, punitive damage.
I think we have lost Sarah for a moment. I'm going to hope that her internet comes back and we're able to pick up where we were left off. So why don't everybody hold tight for 1 second. Okay. Sarah, you had frozen for a moment for us.
Yeah, I seem to have dropped off and then rejoined, and I don't know what happened, but thank you for working with us all. Nancy, I'm sorry, do you happen to know where I froze?
Yes. You were saying that if you put the slide back up, I will.
Okay, let me try.
We're talking about attorney's fees being.
Yeah,
Thank
that's
you.
the part, the last bullet point on that slide, the damages, costs, and attorney's fees, which I was surprised to hear.
Yeah, and the next thing I said that I apparently froze for is that in addition to those damages that an individual consumer can request, there is also, at least in the temporary version of the law, a requirement that if the collector does not include all of the documents in the requirements bullet that I have here on the screen, that their case shall be dismissed. Unfortunately, this law as it stands now is only temporary. There is a permanent version that we hope will be passed. The timing of this presentation is a little bit unfortunate because we originally thought there was going to be a hearing and a first vote before this presentation so that we would know exactly what was in the new law for passage without any changes. But as so often happens in the DC Council, that first reading got pushed back, and so it has not happened yet. But it is likely that the temporary law will be extended until a permanent until the permanent legislation is passed. I have here on the screen the Protecting Consumers from Unjust Debt Collection Practices Amendment Act of 2021. That's the permanent version as it stands now, and there's a link to the limbs. We don't exactly know what the permanent will look like because we haven't seen a final version of it yet, but we expect that it will have most, if not many, of the protections that were in the temporary, and it does still include a requirement that the debt collectors have all of those documents in order to file. It does still maintain the ability of an individual to get attorney's fees and the statutory damages and the actual damages if a debt collector violates any provision of the legislation. And with that, I do have my contact information, the different places you can follow Tzedek DC, and like in case you would like to hear more about these laws, and of course, when and if hopefully when the permanent is passed, we'll definitely post about it on Twitter and on our Facebook account, as well as probably put up a news item on our website. But for now, I will stop sharing and open it up to any questions.
I have a question. I know about sewer service in the landlord-tenant context, but was curious about how significant of a problem that is in the consumer process and if the new legislation is going to be effective in helping to combat that. And maybe you want to define sewer service for everybody on the call.
Sure. So sewer service is generally where an affidavit of service is filed, but it doesn't reflect the truth of what happened and the individual wasn't actually ever served, or the court paperwork was thrown in the sewer instead of given to the house. The temporary that is currently in effect does not have much in the way that will protect from sewer service, but the last iteration of the permanent legislation that we saw requires the plaintiffs in debt collection cases who are filing to give like a GPS location of where they served. I know in landlord tenant, they sometimes require a picture. We're not quite there yet. We might get there, but there is a strengthening of what they have to do to show that they were really at the house and where the house is. There's also a requirement that the collectors, before filing a lawsuit, do some sort of investigation to prove that they have the most updated address for the individual, so that it's not exactly sewer service because there might be service at a bad address, but to make sure that that service is to the correct address. One additional thing that I wanted to say is that even though the temporary law has been in effect since about November of 2021, there hasn't been a lot of litigation on the law because after the mayor issued another public health emergency order in January of 2022, we entered another debt collection moratorium that is ending this weekend. And so there hasn't been much in the way of litigation in these cases because all of the cases have been continued until after the moratorium ends.
Sarah, I've got one other question. Do you
Sure.
know if the temporary legislation has had an effect on small claims division cases?
Yeah, I imagine that it will, but because of the second moratorium that happened, it hasn't really had the opportunity to have that impact yet. But I think that once the second moratorium is lifted, it actually ends on the 15th, so this weekend. I think it will be really impactful on small claims. Most of the debt collection calendar is really in small claims. There are a few on the collections consent, but I think that it's going to be really meaningful. And we've been in the small claims working group with some of the plaintiffs bar, and they, I think, have echoed that it will change some of their business practices as well.
Thank you.
Are there other questions? It's exciting that there's so much going on with the DC Council with the new legislation. And people can obviously click the link for the LIMS notifications to see what's going on. But I assume Tzedek DC is testifying on those bills. Is that right?
Yeah, we have already. There's already been the hearing for both the temporary and the permanent, and we did testify, and we had clients who testified as well. I don't anticipate that there will be another opportunity for testifying, but if there were, we would certainly testify again. It really, at this point, is just getting it over that last hurdle and getting it passed, because it is so close, but the date just keeps getting pushed back. But this is actually this consumer protection bill is really one that we've been working on before the pandemic for years. And it wasn't until the need to cushion the blow to come out of the moratorium for consumers who may not have had their jobs back, may still be caring for a sick family member, may still have incurred more debt over the pandemic if they lost a job. It wasn't until there was that drive to really cushion the blow for those folks that it sort of got traction and has gotten much closer to being permanent law than it was before. And I do also want to recommend that folks click the link in the PowerPoint that goes to the Tzedek DC summary of the bill. We don't have quite enough time here to talk about everything, but there are even more changes that are protective for consumers. For example, one of the things that the temporary law does is limit the ability to get a warrant of arrest for the plaintiffs in collections cases. It requires a bit more service and a bit more process before somebody's able to get a warrant. There, of course, is no warrant for failure to pay in the district, but there are often warrants issued for individuals who don't show up to post-judgment oral examinations. And especially in a situation where there might be sewer service, that seemed really unfair. So it does require, personal service and a bit more process before somebody can have a warrant issued for them.
We do have one question in the chat now, which is there anything being done to reduce anti-litigation terms such as forum damage, limitations, or arbitration?
That is a great question. And I know that is on the consumer advocates sort of push. It's certainly something that's been worked on nationally, but I don't think, at least in the council, that there's anything at this point for that. Right.
So Sarah, thank you so much. This is such a rapidly changing area of the law, especially in light of the COVID pandemic over the past 2 years. And it's been hard to keep up with the moratorium and when is it ending and is it back and is it renewed? And then with the new legislation, it is really helpful to have this overview. And then I will share with everyone the PowerPoint from today. So you will have the links to the pages that will tell you more and where you can access the resources and stay on top of what's been happening. I want to invite everyone to the next DC Refers event that we are hosting together with the DC Bar's Practice Management Advisory Service next Thursday, April 21st at noon on Zoom. There is a lunch and learn about how to grow and expand your low bono practice. And so I know I want to give a shout out to Courtney Wiener and Alfredo Vasquez because they are two of our DC Refers attorneys. And if you want to learn how you could be involved with DC Refers or just learn more about the services that there are there, that would be a great way to do that. We're hoping to come back with another DC Refers Reconnect in May, and we were going to set the date and topic for that coming up very soon. So watch the email lists, and I hope everyone will come back and join us again. So thank you very much to Sarah. And
Oh,
thank
and I just also want to give a shout out to Courtney, who is of course on the Tzedek DC board, so we couldn't do any of this work without her. And when there is a passage of the law, which hopefully will happen, we will definitely publicize it on our social media with a write-up of what the law entails. So do follow us on socials.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody. Bye.